Everything is fine here on Detention Block E24, a Star Wars podcast. I'm Mike, joined by Dustin, here to talk Star Wars, continuing on our conversation from yesterday after watching the final episode of The Acolyte. So we will be talking about that episode in here. Spoiler tag, if you haven't seen it, go watch it, then come back and give us a listen. And I'm going to do something different this time. I'm at the front of our episode. I'm going to do some of the business details. So if you're watching this, press that subscribe button, follow us, like us, review, rate, all of the above. Any little thing that you can do to help get our name out there amongst all the other Star Wars channels, we greatly appreciate it. So figured I'd get some of the business aspects out of the way up front, Dustin. So
Yeah, so people tail off and they say, "Ah, these people are morons."
well, they aren't wrong. We aren't the brightest bulbs in the box, so but continuing on from our conversation. Now, to preface, I don't want to like beat a dead horse. We don't have to continue berating it by any means. Not that we were, but I think we still have a couple of points we kind of want to talk through, but we kind of want to let it marinate after immediately watching it. Let us think about it, gather our thoughts a little bit more. So then here we are today. We're not going to do like a complete episode breakdown, even though this is kind of a review breakdown, but we're just going to open it up since the season is now done. So, Dustin, saying that, what are the first thoughts that come to mind for you?
I think the more you think about some of the character decisions in the show, specifically the last episode, the harder it is to justify like logical explanations for the decisions, which is frustrating because it takes you out of the suspension of disbelief. Like, for instance, I mean, Soul knows that Pip droid, right? Like, he's been around OSHA forever with that thing. Why would he let May have it in her pocket? Right? Like, it just seems it's like, here's a loaded gun. I was just gonna
Yeah.
set it right here next to you, you
Yeah.
know? So that was kind of weird. Um, character decisions that are made that don't really flow with the character that they've developed. For instance, like Kamir just capitulating to OSHA right away. Um, obviously OSHA doing what she did with Soul, yet Kamir killed all of her friends in front of her, and now she's gonna go join him right away. That seems odd.
I think that's one of the hardest points or elements that I'm having the hardest time with. Like, there are certain characters that I still don't understand their motives behind their decisions, but it's really hard for me to fathom OSHA after this individual completely, well, not completely, just kills the people she knows, and all of a sudden now she wants to be with him, and not just to learn from a master and apprentice, but they give like signals that there's sort of a love interest one way or another. I mean, I think Heimer was like kind of holding her hand at the end of that while she's holding the lightsaber. Um, Putting myself into a situation like that, like if an individual killed 8 of my friends, not even just friends necessarily, but even like acquaintances or people I knew well, I, I don't think I'm going to all of a sudden be on their side. And I know that Keimer's in on that was
Getting
when it
naked.
was, well, that was part of it. Um, no, when May got out of Soul, the fact that he did kill Osha's mother, well, both Osha and May's mother. Like, I can understand that frustration.
which he
That
had
would
a
be
completely logical explanation for,
yes.
but then
And
doesn't explain it to her,
and
which
he
is
had plenty of time, not plenty of time, but he had his opening to make that statement. And not to mention, you would think she would have more trust towards Saul than Keimer just in the pure amount of time that she got to know each one of them. Like, you're just going to let, I mean, I guess then again, May is the one also informing Osha that their mother was killed by her. And like, obviously, she loves and trusts her sister. But still,
who tried to murder her.
yeah, exactly. Who also tried to murder her. So that's one of the things that I just have a hard time with in terms of like just core fundamental character development um in this story. It's hard for me to see past that.
Yeah, so like another thing too, Soul says without May, we couldn't prove, that you were part of the Virgins. Yeah, you could have. You took their blood.
You have the results.
You also have three other Jedi to corroborate your story,
Mm-hmm.
right? Here's another thing, right? So Vanestra does what she does, right? She completely covers up. So a cover up of a cover up. And then this now will rock the foundation of the Jedi. Now they are basically being audited by the
Senate.
Don't you think that would cause an internal investigation within the Jedi to figure out
Yeah.
what really happened?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I would think that would cause more of a rift than telling the truth.
but also people within the order knew that someone outside of the order was killing
What's
Jedi.
killing them? Yep.
So now that Soul's being blamed, wouldn't some of those Jedi say, wait a second, that's not how this investigation began. We knew there was an outside. We literally had eyewitness testimony, right? Like, I mean, in Dara, it was a whole bar fight.
Mhm.
I mean,
Not,
so it's to me, it's like this is a simple, like,
not not only
it's one of
that,
those.
there was those Jedi that was it episode 2 when they were going to try and capture May. There was the other Jedi that were stationed at that planet that were helping them find her, who knew what was going on. So, sorry, I interrupted you though.
But I mean, you're right. Like, and I mean, you're adding to what I'm trying to say is that, like, if you just think about this for 10 seconds, you go, but these things don't make sense. And it would lead to Vanestra's downfall, right? And to introduce now Yoda at the very end. So what? Now is he's either going to be complicit or ignorant.
Well,
Those things would ruin him as a character.
and I think both of those can't happen because, I mean, Yoda's going to know her thoughts. I mean, think of episode 1 when they brought Anakin in, and like Yoda was totally reading into Anakin's thoughts and how he felt. And then even Mundi was like, your thoughts dwell on your mother. Like, these masters can sense these things. And Yoda is like the grandmaster of them all, like the most powerful Jedi. He's going to know the truth. So whether Vanestra lies to him or not, he's going to know. And I just don't pin him as someone being complacent with all that. Just how we know who he is in later content. Like, I don't
So,
know.
like, instead of beating a dead horse and kind of being deconstructive, let's be constructive. I would
Yeah.
like to throw out some ideas I think would have made the show infinitely better. I don't want to talk about how they can make season 2 hypothetically better because I don't want to do that because I don't know if they're going to get a season two. And B, I think we can explore that in future videos. But to me, if you had Plagueis working in the shadows, but like you knew that was happening, right? This whole murder mystery thing didn't work, right? They didn't execute it properly. So, like, if you just scrap that from the beginning, right, and you focus on Plagueis and he's at the puppeteer, and Khmer is a puppet trying to discover how life can be created these ways, right? I think that would be an infinitely better beginning to the series, knowing that right off the bat, instead of all this mystery shit that you don't need, right? Because that's what fans, I think, really want to delve into is these really great characters, which, by the way, were written well before the show ever touched anything. You may say Plagueis was Legends, but it's still an awesome book and awesome content to extrapolate from.
Yeah.
So you have Plagueis, right? And maybe he's now manipulating the witches. I mean, there's even a line. Remember, Coral said, what would they think about what you needed to do to create these twins? Well, what
Yeah.
if that was partnering with Plagueis
Yeah.
to create the twins using the dark side of the force? Right? These are things that can make the show better. You don't need the chanting, right? Or any of that. Let's go ahead and scrap any love story, right? You don't need a love story to happen. The murder mystery can go away. And then you have Plagueis pulling the strings, and then you flesh out these characters, right? And another thing is, like, we know, or we hope to know, that May and Osha and Khmer can't survive, or I can't survive much further than a couple seasons, right? Because they have to be killed off to keep the lore. So maybe you have them turn against Plagueis, perfect for the rule of two, right? Because this is what happens a lot of times. Master gets an apprentice. That apprentice now becomes, part of the rule of two. Gets his own apprentice. Now those two battle the master.
Well, and we've seen masters have multiple apprentices within like our canon content. Maybe not officially apprentices, but we'll use the term acolytes in this scenario, that it's kind of like a tryout process, have you? So I can see having multiple apprentices in that aspect. So they don't always follow the rule of two, but I still think, to your point, when it breaks down, it still needs to follow that rule of two.
Another thing that I'm like I feel like we were bait and switched. The Acolyte was supposed to be the dark side perspective. I mean, we got like zero of that. We got like a half an episode with Khmer kind of spouting his exposition.
Yeah. I know the witches were considered dark force, but we were definitely felt that, or not played, but it was advertised that this was going to deal more with the Sith. And I feel like we got way more Jedi perspective than even the witch perspective. And especially
the
the Sith perspective
is some dark side shit,
yeah.
like covering up things, lying, and using anger and frustration. So I guess if that's I just think they could have done some things to make the show better if the writers and the showrunner understood Star Wars at all. This could have been a really great show. And that's the problem. And I think that's most fans' frustration. It's not that they just hate it for the sake of hating it. They don't like it because it could have been so much better. And it's not. It's not good. Like, it's a below average piece of content, whether it's Star Wars or not. The fact that it's Star Wars almost makes it worse because you have such a wonderful universe to pull from. And they've had some just amazing content, like the video games, like Knights of the Old Republic, like Jedi Survivor, like Rogue Squadrons, like back in the day. I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff that they just fall flat on the face.
Yeah. Well, and I understand, creators. So let's say Leslie Headland, they're obviously going to want to make their mark under the like Star Wars banner. And like the best, maybe not the best way, but from my perspective and my interpretation of this, the way that she was handling that is kind of like, well, I need to one up certain characters in a certain way. Like, where can I leave a bang? And one of that is, showing Plagueis. This is the first live action appearance of Plagueis. So you can stamp your name there. You had the Virgins with Anakin. Like that was known as like the first situation like that. It's very unique. Well, now you've got these twin sisters. Okay, I can kind of stamp my name on that. Like I preceded Anakin with these two girls. And in a way, I can understand from a writer's perspective wanting to do that to, again, make a name for yourself. But I think there's times and places to do that. And I don't think coming into such a large franchise like Star Wars, who has a fan base that's already like pretty passionate and pretty loyal, you don't want to go like, stirring that pot. Because when you do, then you see what's happening now. And I just feel like she did that with so many things. Like, even when you think of the bleeding of the Kyber crystal, like in Osha's situation, just her finding out that Soul was the killer behind her mother, whether it was, in good pretenses or not, just that allowed her to bleed the Kyber crystal, turn the saber red. Now let's go to episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Anakin or Darth Vader's Kyber crystal didn't turn red. His saber didn't turn red. That didn't happen until he intentionally, and that's more in the comics, intentionally bled a crystal. I mean, his eyes turned red and everything, and obviously he's killing younglings, and obviously he's feeling a lot of frustration and anger and hate. So having Mace or Osha's situation do that, it just gives off the perception that now she's more powerful than Anakin. Now, Headland did state in an interview that the sisters aren't able to match up to Anakin. Anakin is stronger. Well, the content you provided suggested differently. So just like everything else in the story or the show, the things don't match. They don't add up. It's just all over the place.
I would also say that if I were Soul, I would put a warranty claim in for my lightsaber because conveniently it broke with her just throwing it. We've seen lightsabers, treated worse that hold up better. So that was kind of weird.
Yeah.
But I mean, all in all, I just think the show definitely missed the mark. I think it took a lot of risks, a lot of unnecessary risks when it didn't need to. I feel so. I also feel like the showrunner and the writers didn't respect the source material.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was getting at.
And I'm hopeful, and we'll see. But in mid-August, the new Alien movie comes out, and everything you see from the showrunner is his respect for the source material, right? And him not wanting to like make waves and reinvent the wheel, but to improve upon the existing,
Lore.
plot that he's got. Yeah, lore and platform. So, you know, those things make a difference for whoever's creating these shows. And I just think that there was not much of that went into Acolyte.
Yeah, I completely agree. And going back to positives, I will say when they brought out, the saber fights, and when you brought in a lot of like the force elements as it relates to fighting, like there were some really cool elements in that. I mean, that image in the final episode, remember when Keimer like threw his sabers and they went like behind Soul and they're like swirling and they're converging in on him as Keimer's approaching him, and he does that like force like push type thing. Really resembled what we see in like Jedi Survivor and Jedi Fallen Order. It was like that bubble of like force push. Like that was one of
Yeah.
the coolest things in terms
Hey,
of
here's
force
another thing I'm
powers
thinking about.
seen in live action.
Thinking about this last night. So, when they were battling, right? So like Kamir's lightsaber gets behind Soul's and he's trying to push
Mm-hmm.
Soul's lightsaber to him. Couldn't he have just gone like this, you know,
Yeah.
forward right into Soul's face? That seemed like an obvious strategy. So
Oh,
I
that's
don't,
a good point.
because he's got his lightsaber behind Soul's. So he's
Yeah.
trying to push it towards his helmet to have the Cortosis knock it out of
Yeah,
commission.
because obviously Soul
And he
can't
have
do
just
that
like
because if
moved
he
it
hits,
forward towards Soul's face,
yeah, because if Soul does that, then his lightsaber shorts
gets his
out.
helmet anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so, I feel like again, if you just think about it, and look, that stuff happens in sword fights and
Sure.
things like that all the time, where you look back and you're just like, that seemed
Where
dumb. It
people are
seemed
like leaving.
unnecessary. Obviously,
I
it was
mean,
for
yeah,
dramatic effect.
yeah. Visually, it looked good. Visually, but the suspension of disbelief is the element that makes you start questioning.
Yeah.
Uh, the other thing I want to talk about, and we won't have to spend too much more time on this, but the element of like good versus evil in this show. Obviously, they really grade the lines here on what it means to be good and evil, or good and bad. Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? When you just sit back and think of this whole season now, who do you feel are the good guys and bad guys? And who do you think the creators intended you to feel who the good guys and bad guys are? Just the show alone. If you had no other source content, just this show.
Okay. So I just want to say, you and I have talked about this all the time. Like, I think the Jedi Order sucks, right? I think the scene with the senator where he calls them a religion that borderlines on a cult is pretty darn accurate, right? And so I don't mind at all that they make the Jedi's look like bad guys, right? In the books, in the High Republic books, again, we've talked about this a lot. They almost look like the Jedi look like complete morons, right? So to answer your question, obviously there's a pretty heavy suggestion that the Jedi aren't the good guys you think they are. I don't mind that one iota because I believe that that's the case. And I mean, even in the Last Jedi, there's so much vitriol and animosity and divisiveness to that. But my favorite line was he's just Luke's just like the Jedi Order has got to end. The Jedi Order as we know it needs to end. And he didn't say that verbatim, but like that's basically what he said. And it's 100% true. The Jedi Order has become a bunch of sycophants and a bunch of, you know, bureaucratic, you know, Jedi masters. who care more about internal politics than they do about the actual galaxy and the actual people in the galaxy. Kind of reflects well on like, society, right? These politicians that just, they pander and they
Yep,
don't care about their constituents. Like, do the Jedi really care about normally like the masters I'm talking about, like, because the knights and things like that, you can
sure.
see they do. They're the boots on the ground that see it every day. The Jedi masters sitting in the the temple. Do you think they really care about the common folk? Doesn't seem like it. I
I
mean,
I
they start a war that affects billions of
what
lives.
well, did they start the war or did the Republic start the war?
Well, they were basically, hired guns.
Right. Um, I agree with you on a lot of those things. What I would say the difference is though, and where I think this show kind of goes against any other preceding Star Wars content and goes against like what George Lucas's vision was. Like I think George Lucas would completely agree. Like there's hubris to the Jedi, there's naivety to the Jedi, but the difference is intentions. The Jedi always have the intention of good, whether or not they're understanding the situation correctly, which is kind of what led to the fall of the Jedi. They, I forget how Yoda phrased that, but they were essentially blinded to everything because Palpatine was essentially playing puppet master. But their intentions were always good. This show kind of breaks those lines because now you have headmasters like lying, um, manipulating, going behind their backs and throwing them under the bus. Like for Nestra, essentially saying Soul did everything. Like,
Which
I
again,
re-
like if the Jedi, I mean, you know what? Like, I already don't believe that the Jedi are as dumb as they're portrayed. And as I guess if you want to say nicer, like as naive, but you know, it wouldn't take more than 10 seconds to think, well, this doesn't make sense. Soul couldn't have done this because we've seen in person, like eyewitness testimony that he wasn't even. I mean, you could even prove that he wasn't even there when the other masters were killed.
right,
Like when Nandara was killed, he wasn't even like he was probably at the Jedi Temple. Like he literally has an alibi.
right. But like outside of the Jedi that fell in previous content, so Anakin Skywalker, Count Dooku, they fell and they became part of the dark side for a reason. Like, okay, they were good, but they kind of went astray, which we're now putting them in the dark side and the bad guy bucket. But what other Jedi in the content that we've seen has been shown to be intended, yet still be part of the Jedi? We've seen that in like the Rebel Alliance or the Republic. I mean, Saul Guerrera, in Andor, you've got those good guys that are kind of like teetering on the side of bad. But the Jedi were always the moral center, the well intended. Sure, they're aloof sometimes and freaking idiots. Like, how did you not see that coming? But even in the High Republic books, as dumb as they were in many of those situations, they were always the embodiment of good and good intentions. And this show is the first thing, in my eyes at least, that goes completely against that. And I think
Well,
that was part of the attention. I think that was part of what Leslie Headland wanted. So,
yeah, my problem also is that the mystery and the cause of the cover up is based on false pretenses in the sense
mhm,
that
yep,
like the Jedi could have told the truth and probably not have been disciplined.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think
and
so.
again, Soul says at the end, he's like, I did what was right. So but again, why would he say I did what was right and not explain himself?
He should have.
See, that's what bothers me. You just say, well, I did what was right.
Yeah, and then follow that with I did what I did because I love you. Like, just say,
No,
yeah, just say your
yeah,
mother was killing your daughter, or your mother was killing your sister in front of me. What was I supposed to do? That's all you have to say. Your mother was killing May, the person standing right over here. And she's here today because I intervened. And this whole point of this show is bringing the sisters together, which would have never happened if Soul didn't kill the mother. So why not say that?
yeah. You know, again, don't want to be the dead horse. I feel like we've
Yeah.
done that. Don't want to be too negative. Um, you know,
Keimer's awesome. I hope we see some with him.
who?
Keimer
Yeah, he was great. I mean, there are some weird lines like what? Why
swimming
would?
naked in the pool.
Yeah, well, that was just
And I liked Soul. I
it's
thought
like
the
a
actor
scene
did a
from
good
like
job.
Blue Milk. It's like completely unnecessary. Completely unnecessary. It's just there to shock audiences. But so I mean, Keimer, what he said, what have I, what impression have I given you that I'm fair? And then she, retorts with some pretty mediocre explanations as to why. And then he's like, all right, okay, well, you can drive the ship. And oh, by the way, you also have the cabin that can lock my cabin out. So you basically have the child safety lock, right?
Yeah.
Hell, man. Like that doesn't, why would he do that? Why would he relinquish that much control? Right now, she's the one wearing the pants and calling the shots.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Again, that aspect, that whole
another thing, too, he says something at the tree. He said, the Jedi will not allow someone as powerful as you to exist. And he didn't say that verbatim, but what has she done to show that, really? I mean, she force choked Soul, which he let her. He didn't fight back. So there's one. And then she bled a lightsaber crystal. Those are the only two things that suggested she has any modicum of power.
right.
So I don't understand how she's that powerful all of a sudden. You haven't really seen anything to justify that. But anyway, I don't want to be a dead horse. I think Disney has some self-reflection to do on where they want to take Star Wars and if they want to maintain a profitable division within their company. Because this ain't it. If they continue down this path, they're just going to keep alienating fans and turning people off. I mean, some people, like, I'm not excited for Skeleton Crew at all. I wasn't really excited for Acolyte, and then it came and went, and we're glad it's gone.
Yeah. And I saw some posting. I don't know if it was from the Star Wars social media, but made a comment about the Skeleton Crew show and said something along the lines of like, this is something you and your family are going to want to like invest time into. So if you say family, that tells me it's going to be more of a tamed down show. Wouldn't you think? More like a Kenobi well, even Kenobi had elements that were pretty dark. The whole Vader like bringing that kid out in the street. Like, can we get more of that in Star Wars? Like, that shit's awesome, man. Um, no, but I think that show is probably going to be on the more tame end of the spectrum versus like a Andor or Rogue One or something like that. And I want to see more of the Andor Rogue One.
Yeah.
And what Disney really needs to do, and we saw this with Andor, invest in the story and invest in the actors. And Acolyte did a little bit of that.
And
They
the
brought in
rights. which of
What's
course
that?
story.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And Acolyte did a little bit of that. They brought in some good actors for this show. But put the money in those elements and also pay attention to the lore. Do your research. Let's not, completely change what George Lucas set out to do. And also, before the show, don't let your creator come out and talk about their intentions behind everything and what, like, that was already setting or sending messages to people, and they were already judging it before the show came out. I mean, we weren't judging it beforehand by any means. We wanted it to do well, but we had our reservations leading up to it, especially from things that were said. Would you
So
agree to
again,
that?
going back to like Aliens, and the new Alien come out. So Fede Alvarez is being interviewed, and like the interviewers are trying to like goad him into like, hey, what kind of message are you trying to send with this movie? And he's like, I'm not talking about that. Like that's not what I'm this is not what this is about. This is about telling a story in the alien universe.
Yeah.
Right. So that makes me happy to see that. It's literally the polar opposite of what Leslie Headland did in
Yeah,
her.
because she came out and said, we're doing something along the lines of we're doing something different from George Lucas's vision. Because right away, people are going to be like, well, then why is it Star Wars? Because Star Wars, to a lot of people, is George Lucas's vision. That's why everyone loved Dave Filoni, because they felt he had the best, him and Jon Favreau had the best understanding of what George Lucas was trying to create. And then you just go completely against it. So we shall see, though. I think Skeleton Crew comes out at the end of the year. I want to say November or December. And I believe that's our next Star Wars show that gets released. So maybe there'll be like a Visions season 3 or something like that, because I think they've done that the past 2 years, or was there a year between? I forget. But yeah. So we'll wrap up Acolyte. We'll have to talk some other news in upcoming episodes. But Dustin and I were kind of chatting earlier today, just trying to think of ideas that we can bring to the podcast in between that time. So looking forward to seeing what we come up with. I think one of the major things is we do want to get back into that, bringing guests on and talking with other people and getting opinions in that way. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, I will say, the one thing that the show did, I think, better than what it's at least on par with what we've seen in the past, maybe even above, is the combat has been really fantastic. Some of the scenes have been really compelling, and so I will give it major props for that.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think it's quite at the Duel of Fates level, which is what it got compared to. I think that was kind of overjudging it, but I think it's up there. It's close to it in terms of visual. The thing that separates it about Duel of Fates is the meaning behind the duel as well. And coming into the show, people really didn't have much investment in these characters, so it was hard to meet that level that Duel of Fates was. So, and what about Basil? You loved Basil, right?
Uh,
Why did he destroy the
they gotta
ship?
stop. Disney Star Wars has got to stop introducing these like creature characters that aren't explainable. They don't really add much to the story whatsoever.
Why did the Jedi have this tracker that does shit and destroys their ship?
By the way, there's a scene where Soul just sticks his hand out, and now he knows exactly where Osha is.
Why did he destroy the ship? What was the intent there? Oh well, we won't get into it. Any final thoughts there, Dustin? Anything about what we're going to bring to?
Say that again.
Anything? Any other thoughts that you have? Like speaking of what we're looking to bring to our podcast and upcoming episodes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a trillion people that do this kind of stuff where they talk about and they react to what they see. I feel like we can bring some freshness to not only our podcast, right, but to the Star Wars community, trying to be more creative on what we do, like, talking to a 501st member, or somebody in the VFX department of a show. I don't know if we'd ever get that high kind of guest, but we'll certainly try. I mean, we had moments where we thought we were going to get some pretty cool guests. They're doing that really cool, I don't call it animated, but that YouTube show with Revan and
Oh
Malik.
yeah. Yep.
And it just, I don't know what happened to it. I think COVID killed it, and we just never ever. I mean, nothing came
Yeah.
of
What
it.
was the name of that production company?
I'd have to look. I don't remember, but it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um,
And we had a contact that worked with the editing with some of the actual films. He's a cousin to a friend that we know, but just timing
your
never worked
cousin's
out.
uncle's sister's
Yeah.
brother's roommate. What does that make us? Absolutely
Absolutely no one.
nothing.
Yeah. Um,
I mean, not. And I said this before, but like Mel Brooks would have nothing to do with this. Like he wouldn't stoop as low as to make fun of this particular content. It's too easy. It makes fun of
but
itself.
I know who will.
Family Guy.
No, well, that
God,
would
can
be
you
like,
imagine what they would
oh
do
my
with it?
gosh. No, but the humor, um,
Oh, yes, yes, yes. You're talking about the Honest trailer.
honest trailer. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That'd be great. But if you're listening to this,
That might come out tomorrow, by the way,
I hope so.
because they
He's going to
usually
get
do it
those
after the
requests
show is fully released.
completed. Yeah, and it's going to be requested. So I have to imagine it will. He'll have a fun time with that. So when that's released, we'll probably talk Acolyte again, and we'll.
Good man, I could write the script for that.
But if you're listening to this and you want to be a guest on our show, reach out to us. We always throw out our social media handles. You can come chat at, while we're live streaming, whatever. If you have an interest in coming on, and you have whether it's the Star Wars trait or skill or whatever collection. I mean, we've had saber duelists, we've had photographers. Come on, tell us your story, tell us your connection with Star Wars, and we'd love to share that with all of our listeners. So reach out. On that note, I'll speak to our social media handles. So you can find us on Twitter at DetBlockAA23pod, on Instagram at detention_block_AA_23, and then our Facebook group and YouTube channel, Detention Block AA23, a Star Wars podcast. And then, of course, you can find us on TikTok now at DetBlock AA23. As I said at the beginning of the show, bring us your likes, follows, downloads, subscriptions, all of it. We greatly appreciate it. So with that, anything else, Dustin? Sleepy time?
Big God's over. Yeah.
Oh, the show. Yeah. I thought you meant our episode.
No, I meant like the Acolyte.
Acolyte.
No. But maybe both. I'm tired. We stayed.
Yeah, I know. We were up late last night,
early.
And hey, I stayed up and edited everything too, just so I could release it. So I didn't get to bed until like 1:30 in the morning. But
yeah, you're more of a night owl than I am.
I am. Yeah, you get sleepy earlier. So,
sleepy.
But you get up early too. So, all right. With that, have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your week, and we look forward to bringing more content to everyone. So, with that, may the Force be with you.
And also with you.
And with the